Welcome to the kickoff of season 2 of our National Healthy Masculinity Conversation Series. My name is Adam Middleton. I'm the digital director here at Men Can Stop Rape, or MCSR, as you'll commonly hear it referred to this afternoon. And this series is but one component of our Healthy Masculinity Action Project and serves as a platform for creative dialogues we facilitate. Here we examine healthy masculinity's presence in all areas of human behavior, especially in the prevention of men's violence against women and girls. And today we're discussing using 12 comprehensive primary prevention skills and the social ecological model to move upstream. We are so excited to have you in today's conversation, and we really mean have you in the conversation because we're inviting your thoughts every step of the way. Please use the YouTube chat feature to submit your thoughts or reactions or questions for the Q&A we have at the end of our time together. We're also taking your reactions and thoughts and questions on Twitter as well using the hashtag MCSR series. That's hashtag Mixer Series. I'll get us started today by thanking you so much for tuning in. It's October, a very busy time for us, and I'm sure you as well. Our programs are in full force. We're getting back into schools, and I'd be remiss not to mention the Most and Wise Club facilitators who are working hard to give students the space they need in this unprecedented time. We know firsthand our back to school season, and our young people are facing a readjustment challenge as they continue to grapple with the pandemic trauma and the conditions of returning to school in person. We're facing a unique and necessary demand to expand our Most and Wise clubs to meet these needs. And we're up for the challenge. And the good news is you can help. I invite you to scan the QR code displayed on your screen to give us some support and support our work with empathy, encouragement, and guidance. Young people can build the resilience necessary to overcome the challenges they face today and any that may come tomorrow. With your help, Most and Wise will meet this unprecedented demand and the ongoing needs of our children. As a young member shared with us this month, Owen, it's a place where he comes to feel safe. And at a time like this, we can all use that. So with that, we invite you to please donate and support our work using the QR code displayed on your screen or at mcsrmixer.org. And now we're going to get into today's conversation. So moving upstream, it's become a common analogy for primary prevention and addressing the root causes of gender-based violence. Primary prevention, of course, quickly defined as intervening before harm occurs. And at Men Can Stop Rape, we have combined moving upstream with 12 comprehensive primary prevention skills applied to the 4 levels of the social ecological model, which is advocated by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention as a model for primary prevention of sexual assault. So to discuss that very model and those 12 skills and so much more, please welcome MCSR's Executive Director, Neil Irvin, our Director of Strategy and Planning, Platt McGann, and Senior Director of National Programs, Jason Page. And before we get started, I just want to mention that today is Purple Thursday in acknowledgement of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I've got my purple on, as a few of my colleagues do as well. So just lifting that up as a part of today's conversation. But let's get started. And the way that we got here, really, I'll start with Neil, is, as colleagues in this work, we have all kinds of conversations. Men Can Stop Rape from the beginning has posed challenging ideas. And so we, of course, believe in primary prevention as a tool. But, I think we came into this conversation about, really pulling and prodding on what we understand primary prevention to be. And so I'll just open and have you say, from your perspective, what works when it comes to primary prevention, and frankly, how might it have its limitations?
Yeah, thank you for all that, Adam. I think it's great, and hello, everyone. I think as Men Can Stop Rape moves closer to our 25th anniversary here very shortly, out of the guise of continuing to be accountable as an organization, wanting to make sure that we are continuing to use the best in public health, the best in social services, the best in all areas of human activity in service of our mission and our vision. And as Adam said, to prevent men's violence against girls and women by promoting healthy masculinity, we have to keep asking ourselves questions so that we're not resting on our laurels or believing that we've gotten to some end point when we know that there are still so many people who are in harm's way and are being impacted by not only gender-based violence, but all sorts of risk and protective factors that aren't being met in people's lives. And so, I really was not trying to be flip, but coming out of my time with the Independent Review Commission and the Department of Defense and being on the prevention wing of that great project, and so proud of the work that we did as a community on that project, I kept coming away with this challenging question of, can you really do primary prevention in a society, looking at the socio-ecological model? Can you really do primary prevention when, unfortunately, if you think of the smallest child, at Men Can Stop Rape, we talk about prevention work being from conception throughout the lifespan. Can you really do that in a world, in a community, in a society, and communities that have so many, as I said earlier, risk and protective factors not being met, where young people particularly are so vulnerable to a society that is not validating the experiences they're having, whether it be through COVID or bullying or educational requirements or economic resources or expense? I mean, primary prevention, preventing something from happening before it occurs, whether it be seatbelt law or secondhand smoke or all of the, can you really create such a pristine environment where you could prevent some of this harm from occurring in someone's lives? And it may not be an apples to apples type of question. Maybe you can do it more in some areas of our lives behaviorally than in others. But I wanted Men Can Stop Rape, as we look towards the next 25 years of our work, to challenge our thinking, our understanding, our experience with primary prevention by asking the question, is primary prevention and getting further upstream, getting past the person that's doing harm and finding out how that individual got to a place to believe that causing harm was acceptable, was an expression of their own trauma. How do we get even further left? And so I brought that, as always, to our colleagues and to the organization so that we could wrestle with this and work through it and look at it from different perspectives to see, here in 2021, preparing for Men Can Stop Rape's next 2 decades of work, our next 25 years of work, what do we need to learn about primary prevention? And we think that we've started with these 12 skills as a way to start really tangibly developing the muscle memory, the consciousness, the attitudes, the social norms around primary prevention for the next 25 years of our work. And so that was where I wanted to, again, lean into Pat and Jason, Adam, yourself, and our other colleagues who will be joining us to think this through and to figure out what we need to still learn and what gaps exist in this next iteration of primary prevention.
Thank you. You mentioned the social ecological model, so we'll throw that up for everyone to see just as a refresher. But let me take it to Pat. You know, this bigger question, either in response to what Neil had to share or your own views. Do ongoing social ills challenge or even negate the opportunity for primary prevention? You know, for example, how do we deliver primary prevention to a young adult who is 18 years old and has already been exposed to the world?
Well, they certainly complicate it, and they don't make it easy. I think, you know, a lot of times we make maybe primary prevention too simple, because then it becomes manageable, but also, you know, we lose something, I think, when we make it too simple, is what I hear Neil saying. And that, you know, part of the challenge is like, how do we do primary prevention in its entirety? Because if ultimately it's about social norms, if it's about, I mean, I for me, the thing that Neil's bringing up that's interesting in terms of going upstream, and you know, when you first talked to me about it, Neil, it was about how do we go further upstream so that it's not. A lot of times, I think what happens is we stop at the level of the individual. If you want to, Dan, can you throw up the social ecological model? So you can see there's the 4 different levels, you know, the individual relationships, which has a lot to do with peers and just, you know, the people that we connect with, and then community, the larger sort of sense, and then finally societal. And so we all know that the ideal is to work at all these different levels, I think, at this point. But a lot of times what, you know, we happen to do is work at that level of the individual, because that's in a lot of ways the most manageable. So, you know, the question for me is like, what does it look like to work at all 4 of these levels? And how can we think of going upstream as connected to all these 4 different levels? And Neil, that's what I got out of kind of what you talked about that really has stuck with me.
Jay Page, our senior director, of national programs. What's your take on this?
Well, I agree with Pat. When Neil brought the conversation up, this has been an ongoing conversation for us as an organization, as a community. Um, and when I think of Upstream and I think of, social ecological model, for me, we talk about the ills and the social norms of society. And how do you engage someone who's already 17, 18, 19 years old that's been affected by the violence in their community? I think of just being nuanced and intentional about the starting point of the conversations. For me, it's about it's about primary conversations. And everyone has a different starting point in that process, right? So we can not only just focus on the individual, but we get to all four parts of the social ecological model. So that's what I, got from what Neil was saying. That was a piece that I got from what Neil was saying that I've been focusing on, specifically as, collectively as an organization. We're in several different communities, but me personally and professionally in my role, having to do so as we expand our Most and Wise clubs in states that already exist, in different states as well.
Absolutely. Let's take it back to the conversation. We can pull down the social ecological model. Thank you. Jason, let me stick with you. So, this is a question that we're wrestling with ourselves as much as we, fully believe in the opportunities and the success of primary prevention. I'm curious, as a professional, how do you respond when the way that the success of primary prevention is measured, or perhaps the tangible outcomes of primary prevention are challenged?
Well, when you said when they're measured and they're successful, right? We know that's a big part of the work. And we have to count those wins, right? We have to acknowledge those wins. But overall, for me, the wins is reassessing how we engage the next group of people. And the challenges that we do face is, a lot of times, unfortunately, the work we do in community, you don't see those changes right away. Right. Me and Neil talk about that all the time. Neil not only being a colleague and our executive director, but a mentor of mine. Years ago, when we first started working together, it was the patience that you have to have. And when you believe in primary prevention, the steps, and then how it changes. Because, 7 years ago, Neil, we weren't talking about, going upstream or going further upstream. That wasn't language, or, that maybe wasn't the thought process as a whole. So for me, it's about making sure that we're finding the balance in the successes, but also at the same time, those challenges, making sure that we know as a community that it takes a while for that change. So they're not always, right away tangible. You can see them right away, right? I don't know if that answered your question. I'm sorry, Adam.
Oh, it does. I'm gonna take it right to Neil in response to that and add. Could a question framed this way almost speak to what Pat said about the oversimplification of primary prevention?
I think that's right. I was about to say, Adam, so I'm glad that we're all around that Jay, what you just lifted up and what Pat had said earlier in terms of primary prevention's role, that its role requires it takes more time. It takes patience to do aspects of primary prevention, and that its goal is not necessarily always to produce something tangible. So, we're always so thrilled and will always be front and center to work with our armed services. I think the men and women who do those jobs are obviously so very important to our nation. And yet I recognize it's an environment where tangible outcomes is the expectation. Research, data, we need something that's an outcome. And there are obviously ways to measure primary prevention. But I think for the everyday person, the everyday advocate, the everyday activist, the everyday community person, parent, friend, brother, sister, husband, partner, we have to recognize that primary prevention's goal is not to be the same as intervention's goal when it comes to, say, crisis. And that we as a field, and Men Can Stop Rape specifically with our role as leaders in this work, to continue to remind people that primary prevention, Pat said this so well when we started this conversation, is not all that you do. It's, that awareness raising of an issue is not where we stop. So very much in line with what Jason said, we're not just getting upstream in that public health model and seeing the individual who's causing harm and stopping just to intervene with that individual to stop them from harming others. But to Jason's point, we want to get to further upstream where that individual has never gotten to a place where whatever has made them think violence was acceptable unfolds. And I think that's the work that that's the accountable work that I want Men Can Stop Rape to turn our attention to as we look to the next 25 years, because primary prevention is indeed so comprehensive and it's very subtle in moments. So I think that the nature of that subtleness is something that our field has to give itself permission to embrace. We are not necessarily looking to produce an outcome with today's primary prevention activity, as much as we might simply be raising awareness of an issue as a starting point for subsequent work. And so that's where Jason, Pat, Adam, the question that you were to ask, for me, continues to be the place where I think we are moving. And again, wanting to use these 12 skills, prevention skills, as a outline for the direction we're going, feels in line with not only the previous 25 years of our work and the data that we've collected around that, but moving out on the next 25 years of our work, really being positioned to get further upstream, is where I think the continued challenge will be. How do we do that efficiently? How do we do that inclusively? And how do we demonstrate the patience, to Jason's word earlier, the patience that it takes to move upstream? This last thing I'll say, Mac, but I always think about, people who explored the West, and, you're carrying boats on your back and you're doing all sorts of things because you weren't prepared for the terrain. And I think primary prevention must be thought of similarly. We're moving up confidently that that's the right thing to do, but we may not be aware of all that we're going to uncover as we move upstream. So we need all sorts of tools and resources to help us adjust and engage that socio-ecological model. And I think these 12 skills do that.
If I could jump in just in response to that, because I think you're bringing up an important point in the terms, as I'm thinking this kind of through, and, I think one of the things we talk a lot about now is changing social norms. And if I think about that in relation to what you're talking about, Neil, we don't know, we don't know what kind of social norms we're going to face in the future. I mean, who knows, what those are going to be. So, we have to be nimble. We have to be comprehensive. We have to recognize that this is a fluctuating environment, that it's going to change in various ways. I mean, I do think there are essential skills that help us do that. But, we have to recognize that the environment, the social environment that we're trying to work against in a lot of ways is not static. So, to kind of approach primary prevention in that way, in terms of both of what you've been talking about, is it is subtle, and it is comprehensive, and it's like, I don't even know if we've done a great job of defining the social norms now that we need to be addressing. So we know we need to do that. I mean, I think as an organization we have some ideas, but I think that's an area that's getting more attention, but and an area of growth, but there's still a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, let's start that work, shall we? And it's a great pivot into the 12 comprehensive primary prevention skills. These are taken from our, Men Can Stop Rape newest training on primary prevention. And we really believe that these 12 skills will help move us and those who engage with us from the broad theoretical perspectives we're discussing today to tangible steps. So if you see the skills displayed here, there are two that are general, opening comprehensive primary prevention skills, and then the following sections, the 4 following sections, tie directly to the individual, the relationship, the community, the societal, truly moving upstream. And so I'll take it to whomever wants it, because I'm sure you all want to spend a little time deciding how you answer this. But in our field, looking at these 12 steps, what would you say has been a real sticking point or obstacle toward progress in how these skills are applied, or even for us as an organization, what maybe has been hard to grasp and most difficult to really put into practice, and what represents why it's so important that it's reflected here in these 12 comprehensive skills?
Well, and as Pat and Jason and I were outlining this, and guys, let's ping pong with it. I look at the one that I think is most time consuming, and I think also most misunderstood. I think it's very easy to say the ability to meet people where they are, right? So from a mental health perspective, a community, we're going to meet people where they are. And what I think people miss with that is, one, how much time that may take to build the trust to actually have someone, to develop a relationship, and the time that it takes for someone to trust you enough to hear what you're saying that may be contradictory to the way that they believe or that they behave. And I think the skill that goes into that for me is not only meeting people where they are, but a willingness to stay maybe in an ugly place as you support their healing or their transition or developing your relationship with them. And so I think that one, the ability to meet people where they are, is the one that can be hard, because this is where you get into bias and people's perceptions of who they think they're working with. And so I think that becomes a challenge. I think all of these are important and are a great outline for subsequent and additional skills. But that one for me feels the most time consuming. As an organization that works in about 32 states right now with our youth development programs, urban, rural, suburban, frontier communities, meeting people where they are looks so drastically different in every one of those locations. So the skill set that's required to be both diplomatic and yet inclusive, yet conviction with learning objectives, capturing, ready to evaluate and to measure the impact. I mean, that takes time. And I think it's hard when you're looking at whether it be program years or funding cycles or outcome needs, to think that you can do that in a day, an hour, a workshop with a curriculum. These things take time. And I think that's the one for me is, of all of these, the one that is both micro and macro at the same time and requires that kind of buy-in and attention. But I know my colleagues think have insights as well. So Pat, Jay, I'll just stop there.
Well, certainly I know in terms of our technical assistance work, that's the place where we see people shortchange the time, like you're saying, the time that they should spend on that. And they want to jump straight into the programming, right? Or, straight into the work. But, without kind of laying the foundation and those kind of connections, relationships in the social ecological model, right? That you can't do the work. You're building your allies, so you can't do the work in the same kind of way if you don't spend way more time there than you're thinking of. And I think I'd probably be remiss as a director of strategy and planning if I didn't at least speak a little to the ability to plan strategically. So, I think a lot of times prevention gets kind of, it's not a thing unto itself, but it's, part of a nonprofit that's, does intervention work, and, prevention's getting some attention, but, it's if there is a strategic plan, it's probably a large one that, prevention fits into. And what we're talking about, the way we're speaking about prevention, if you really want to do it in kind of the wholesale way that Neil is talking about and Jason's talking about, it deserves its own strategic plan, I would argue. Right. That it's not something that that fits, in a small way into something else. But if you're really working at all these levels and thinking about all these skills that are involved at all these different levels, that, as Adam suggested, you've got to give it that space, to really strategically plan around it. So that's kind of a thing that stands out for me. And Jason, I'm sure there are things that stand out for you.
Yeah, I'm just going to lift the time piece, because that time and the patience, it relates to 8, 9, and 10, right? Being able to do that, you're going to build those relationships needed to find those credible messengers and those influencers, to be able to motivate communities, right? And really engage them and really know how to engage them, which gets to number 10, right? The skills to identify the different healthy social norms, because all communities are different, all cultures are different. So that's that work that we have to do, right? As community folks, as folks that are doing this prevention work.
Take this opportunity to just remind everyone watching that we are taking questions through the YouTube live chat and on Twitter with MCSR series. So we can see how many of you are out there watching. So if you want to engage in the conversation, we more than welcome it. So of course, we've developed these 12 comprehensive primary prevention skills as an organization that conducts this very work. And so I'm curious for each of you, what might be a standout or core example of how any of these skills shape the way we do our work, shape the way that Mixer creates content or informs our approach really as an organization. For example, I can speak to, myself. I didn't give this away at the top, but I also am a Most Club veteran from the Benjamin Banneker Academic High School class of 2011. And, thinking about the ability to raise individuals' awareness of harmful and pro-social attitudes and behaviors, I think about my first experience with the continuum of harm exercise, right? Being in a club and seeing myself and my colleagues connect these different behaviors to a broader societal trend and understanding the power of bystander intervention and just really seeing things through the right lens. And so there were so many things on there, but it was an aha moment where you really see how raising an individual's awareness can then translate to moving further and further upstream, where, I became connected with this organization and you guys seemingly can't get rid of me.
That's right. That's right. Well, the one I like, I guess I'll look at, Jay was talking about 8, 9, and 10. I like the skills to identify healthy social norms. And my work, my passion for this work and my role here is really about as a youth advocate and supporting young people at all times. And if you think about social norms, you can look at old Disney movies from the 70s and 80s, and they're smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol in Disney movies. And so, when you think about what healthy social norms are, don't dare turn the key on in the car without the seatbelt buckled, because your kids will freak out. They've so been steeped in an environment where the reality that you're safer wearing a seatbelt when you drive a car is not lost on them. And so I think those are the places where we as a field have to do, from a strength-based approach, spend more time showing, and I love this is some of the work that I love this language and working with DOD and the different branches. I love the term and the phrase of what right looks like, and so healthy social norms of what right looks like, whether it be through nutrition or environment or community. I like helping to expose and identify with our young people when we see them doing the right thing and doing things that are good for themselves and their community and all of us. Continue to lift those up, celebrating those, role modeling that we want to see more of those things. I really like that one, skills to identify healthy social norms, because I think we all every day witness, and this kind of leads into some of the bystander intervention stuff, we witness examples of what right looks like. And to have the courage and the conviction to do that each time, I think these skills prepare us to do that. I think they can become so a part of our identity as people that we are in position to always be engaging primary prevention in multiple ways as a way to maximize that largest ring of societal, that we're living in a society where everyone is constantly trying to prevent harm from happening before it does. I think that to me feels like a great challenge and a great opportunity to the next 25 years of Men Can Stop Rape's work.
And I think what gets lifted up a lot is wrong, and like you're talking about, the right, it's out there, it's all around us, it happens all the time, but it doesn't get lifted up. Mm-hmm. And so really, it's about recognizing that it's there. It's about kind of learning to see it, identify it, like we're suggesting here, and the power behind that. I'm thinking back early. Neil, this is before you even started with the organization, and we've both been around a long time with Men Can Stop Rape. But early in the life of the organization, we were doing one of our trainings, and I just remember a guy. And this is before we focused on healthy masculinity. And, guy was like, okay, I get it. These are problems. What am I supposed to do now? And it's like, until we show, guys and people in general, it's like, this is possible. This already exists. It's here in front of us. We just have to see it, you know, and you know, not only see it but live it, make it kind of part of who we are and part of our identity as a people. That's really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, again, like I think that it's almost like a salesman who doesn't realize they've already made the sale.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
they keep selling when
yeah.
when the goodness and the rightness and the thing that we want to see more of has occurred. And unfortunately, sometimes when those good things, those serviceable, useful things unfold, we push past them because we then all of a sudden are like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. It's the right thing. And we push past it without honoring or looking at, you know, hey, help others understand why you understood how to execute. We're unfortunately all trying to support the sexual assault that happened on SEPTA up in Philadelphia, and people are videotaping this violence. And what was going on that those people didn't understand a more impactful way to prevent that violence from continuing to unfold. So to your point, Pat, I just think that there is a great opportunity along that way of thinking about social norms and lifting up what right looks like and people's daily involvement and interaction with it. I think that can't be stated enough.
Yeah.
Jay Page, you jump in here, you know, back to the original question or reaction to our colleagues, you know, is there any standout or core example of how these skills shape the way we, you know, perform our work as an organization from your perspective?
I was in one of those moments enjoying listening to Neil and Pat right there, Adam. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's the skills to teach social intelligence, right? I think that's something as an organization we've been really intentional about in working in community and doing this violence prevention work. Being able to meet with people and meet them where they are, but then also uplift the piece of, you know, the ability for them to think a little further and have the social awareness around what's going on in their communities, and to identify the violence and to work through the violence and go through the process of healing. That social emotional intelligence piece is really important. And it's something that I know, like I'll repeat it again, it's something that our organization as a whole been intentional about, and used other organizations and built other relationships with other organizations that are doing that work intentionally on an everyday basis. So that stands out for me.
Absolutely. You know, thinking about how we took a stab at such a broad theoretical approach and did our best to boil it down to 12 truly comprehensive skills, but I'm curious, you know, what's not here, or what is it that would have been skill 13 somewhere that we know when you go a click further, when you go a little bit further down the funnel, is such an important part to a comprehensive primary prevention strategy. Curious if that's something that any of us feel like we can answer.
I would say, I think we spoke to it a little bit, and it's kind of in meeting people where they are, but it's also how we design all of our logic models and all of our programs. You know, the preparation, the awareness, the reality of prepare for the unknown. We as I said earlier about moving west, we know they're going to become challenges that we see as opportunities or obstacles that we see as benefits to how we keep getting left and how we keep getting further upstream with primary prevention. And so I think that is a value that we take at Men Can Stop Rape, recognizing that we have an expertise, but we're not the experts. And we want to be prepared for, I think it was Pat, you said it, or Jay, about being ready to be nimble and to adjust our teaching and our learning and our listening and our consistency. So I would say, you know, prepare for the unknown, because there's never been a global pandemic in my lifetime that's been like this. We've had to make adjustments to serve our young people. There have never been some of the public health requirements. I didn't know that I should have been in the mask industry, you know, 4 years ago. So I think those are the kinds of moments where not expecting an outcome and preparing for the unknown has always allowed Men Can Stop Rape to be quite comfortable when adjustments need to occur. I think it's one of our strengths, because we do indeed are able to flow into these new opportunities with our eyes wide open and not intimidated or frustrated that a planned result might look different. Human behavior is not always as quantifiable as some research may want us to believe.
I can think of course, I can think of things that aren't in here. I mean, and this is not number 13, but there's a lot of subskills that are tied to each of these primary skills. I would say 12 comprehensive primary prevention skills. So it's like, what are the subskills? But apart from that, I think you could add something connected to assessment and evaluation and skills around that, and really think about what skills would those be that are doable and manageable for people doing the primary prevention work potentially. I know we use focus groups a lot, but and that's kind of one of our primary ways of doing assessment. And certainly we've been involved with groups that do research as a profession, but I don't think that skill is there. It's something to think about.
So Mac, I want to support everything that Pat said is 100% right, and obviously the research and comprehensive research and longitudinal research and evaluation, it's needed. But you know that I came away from my time thinking everyone does not have the dollars it takes to do that level of research. Mm-hmm. And so I think that becomes the obstacle when people ask me, how do you know it works? Or people say, let me see your evaluation. I know enough about evaluation that you can always pose another evaluation question. And so I think until we invest the dollars necessary in primary prevention evaluation, and again, that was one of the recommendations coming out of our IRC work, more research and evaluation on primary prevention and across the enterprise for all sorts of work, just more research of what we don't know specifically about primary prevention. I think that becomes the challenge, because you get decision makers who believe, back to the amount of time and patience it takes, who believe that if you put an evaluation instrument in place, that the primary prevention, that you should get a result, right, every time that is supporting the need for further primary prevention, and that the outcomes of primary prevention are always quantifiable. They may not be. And I think that's the permission we're asking people to give themselves, because to Pat's point, once you start getting some clarity on either what your gaps are, what your challenges are, what you're trying to accomplish, then maybe you can ask a better research question to do the right evaluation and to evaluate so you can see what gaps exist within it. So we believe in the science, we believe in the evaluation, we believe in the data, but I also want to lift up, the data doesn't tell the entire story. It just can't. It's not what the data's role is either. And I think some people get lost on, well, show me the data, show me the data, show me the data. And they're going to miss the nuance that is not just an individual variable, but a pattern of behavior that affects climate and culture that may not even be being looked at. And I think that's the piece where you need both, right? So back to your point of a comprehensive look, both through research and evaluation, but also the spaciousness to give it time to unfold so you even know what question you might want to ask.
Yeah. And Neil, I feel like we undervalue assessment. Just assessing, okay, what are the issues in this community, for instance, before I even step into this community, how can I assess, what the needs are, what the gaps are, and in terms of what we were talking about earlier, see that as an opportunity to build relationships, to build connections, all of that together. So I feel like that can kind of play a larger role as well.
I like that.
Pat, I agree. I mean, I think assessing it with the proper people at the table. Back to those 8, 9, and 10, those true influencers, those true people, the folks that really are engulfed and got their feet to the ground in their communities. Right. Because we can't help folks in Baltimore. Even though we're so close, we can't help them in Baltimore assess their community because we're here in DC. We may have some knowledge, but really understanding who those people are, right? Because we always say, Neil said it earlier, we're not the experts. We bring some expertise to the table. We're not the experts. So I think that's something that, we really have to focus on and make sure that we remind ourselves about.
Well, and I heard you say something that I think is also a value that we hold. We don't have to do this by ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. We don't have to do this alone. And I think that's what, the violence relies on. The violence relies on us thinking that we're isolated and by ourselves. And that's just never been Men Can Stop Rape's approach. Our mission is about mobilizing. And, when you think about that, that's a numbers game. We're trying to bring force, a strength-based approach to getting upstream and getting to find out how do we establish an environment where everyone's needs are being met at all areas of the socio-ecological model or the best science in human development. I think that's where we're trying to get. So the thought of harming someone else would be abhorrent to us all as a society. And I think that's where we have to get. Imagine if you lit a cigarette right now in an elevator, people would be activated. And I'm old enough to remember where people smoked on airplanes. So I think that's the moment where we have to really remember what Jay was saying. We have great friends in Baltimore County and Baltimore City and the state of Maryland, and yet we're not there every day, but are ready to be allies with them whenever called. We sit with the Maryland Coalition of Sexual Assault to support them and Maryland Rise and their great work in the Department of Health. You need friends. And I think the socio-ecological model speaks to that. We need friends to do this work. We need allies in the midst of violence and people's needs not being met. The thought that there's some superhero coming to resolve this for us is what the violence, not only that dominant story tells us, but it relies on us believing that we're the ones who are going to resolve this because we've got a curriculum or a training or a public education campaign. It's not how it works. And I think we're wise enough as an organization over our 25 years to know we need everything. We're bringing all resources to get upstream because we know that we don't want to just get there for a moment, but we want to create an environment where we can really meet people where they are. We may get upstream and find out, back to social norms, that we're going to be here for a little while. And I think that's where the next 25 years of our work is taking us. We're ready to be here for a little while.
And that's why we define it as comprehensive, really. And it makes me think of the old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
That's a fact.
And that's one of our values, really.
That's a fact.
So let me pivot us to Q&A. We got some good questions coming in, but to get us started, I'll actually invite two of our colleagues onto the stage. So we've got Alan Hill and Jasmine Mendez. I will do them the courtesy of letting them introduce themselves, but I will preview that they have been with us for a while in a way similar to myself. And so, I'll start with you, Jasmine. As a club veteran, you are familiar with the things that we've discussed, not only in theory, but in practice. You've lived it through our Women Inspiring Strength and Empowerment Club. And so, just in addition to the conversation that's unfolded, what's resonated with you?
I definitely want to say that the first point that resonated with me was meeting people where they are. I feel like that's one of the biggest takeaways that I have learned from being in Wise Club and more so working with Men Can Stop Rape. So right out of high school, I started working with them as like an intern. So I kind of got to be like a co-facilitator in the club to see like the other side of it. And that definitely helped me see, because every club is different, every person is different, and you have to literally meet everybody where they are. And that really helped me going to college and, just interacting with people throughout life and relationships, at home with my parents. I think that was one of the biggest things that I think Jason mentioned, or Neil, I think it was Neil that mentioned it, that I took away from that. And then also, I think it was the second point. Sorry, I took a picture of it on my phone. One second. Oh, the third one, actually. The ability to raise individuals' awareness of harmful pro-social attitudes and behaviors. And I think that's something that Adam touched on with the continuum of harm. And I literally like that is ingrained in my head. I like in my sleep, I see that in my sleep. So I feel like that is the main thing. Like in my friend group, I was definitely like, when my friends would be like, oh, I want to fight such and such that I'm dealing with. No, you can't do that. You know, this such and such is wrong. You have to healthy communication and all this other stuff. So I feel like that also was like a big takeaway for me. It really helped with like how I live life and how I kind of like respect other people and, you know, just love in general. So yeah, Men Can Stop Rape and Wise Club and Most Club is definitely like the biggest part of my life, I feel like.
Alan, what about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what's resonated with you this afternoon.
All right. Well, my name is Alan Hill. It's almost been about 10 years with Mixer, from Most Club to like Jasmine being an intern and now co-facilitating Most and Wise Club. Well, not Wise Clubs, but Most Clubs. I'd say what stuck with me or what has really impacted my life would be the engaging community aspect, because while I lived abroad in China for about 3 years. And while living abroad, I really had to engage their community. So being in Most Club, it kind of helped me develop the skills to help me maneuver throughout an entirely different community in which they have a different culture and communication, standards. So it helped me respect their culture and just overall manage and develop healthy relationships with those of a different background.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Question for everyone. This is coming through YouTube from Greg Smith. Greg first said that I see skills 3 through 7 as the hardest to accomplish. So those are our skills about the individual, difficult to learn in ourselves, not to mention to teach others, and is curious about what strategies we all have for that number 3, which is to, want to make sure I get it exactly right. It's the ability to raise individuals' awareness of harmful and pro-social attitudes and behaviors. So exactly what we're talking about and what Jasmine and Alan have reacted to. What skills or what strategies are in place to help really ingrain that 3 through 7?
Well, I will just start quickly and say, exposure to a different perspective of people's understanding, the whole boys will be boys. That got so normalized that people didn't ever explore it or unpack it. And we have to be thankful for the women's movement of, 100 years, but I would say specifically the last 40 to 50 years of really holding language accountable, inviting men and holding men accountable to do this work as well, so that we were starting to confront some of these social norms around attitudes, assumptions, beliefs, and behaviors. And for our young people, as Jasmine and Alan experience as facilitators in our Most and Wise Clubs now, continuing to offer alternative understandings of negative or destructive behaviors, preparing and practicing alternatives to those behaviors, role modeling them, whether it be through some of the scenario work that we do, some of the interactive curriculum that we do, some of the skill-based training that we do, as we're talking about the 12 skills of primary prevention here. But there's a muscle memory associated with doing the right thing. And so we want to really give and challenge our young people to see and hear trusted adults and their peers offering alternative to these social norms. And I think that's been one of the strengths. We can't give it to you, right? If we could give nonviolence and peace to everybody, we would focus on world peace and we would resolve it by next Thursday. But that's not how human behavior and human development works. And so for us, it is, as Jason loves to say, it is the consistency in our community and our colleagues and our peers and our families' lives that we bring to constantly hold ourselves accountable by role modeling the behaviors and the attitudes and the language of healthy social norms, of what we call counter stories, so that we are moving in the direction of creating, not only getting upstream, but creating environments where nonviolence is the standard rule of behavior and acceptable behavior. And I think that exposure is what takes the time and the patience that we were talking about earlier.
And I want to just to build on what Neil was talking about. Please. And was it Greg who asked the question? Was it Greg? I think what I hear you talking about, Neil, or one of the things I hear you talking about is the need for support. It's just really hard to do by yourself. It's a lot easier, if you've got people around you who are thinking about, working on, struggling with these issues, and that, really, that's the thing. One of the things I like about Most and Wise clubs is that they create kind of a support peer group. And probably Jasmine and Alan can speak to that better than I can, but I think that we all need, kind of, in doing this work, we all need support. Certainly Men Can Stop Rape has been that for me, and important. I've been with the organization for almost 25 years, so it's been a huge kind of support in my life for doing this work. And I would invite Jasmine and Alan, if you have anything to add to that, feel free.
I would definitely piggyback off what Pat and Neil said. It definitely goes back to support and consistency. I would use an example that in my real life, like my cousin and my brothers, they kind of like use vulgar language towards women. And so I would kind of just and then it also goes back to the second point of meeting people where they are. And you have to just help them understand that that's not necessarily the right way to go about things. And now, they kind of catch themselves. Like, if they were to say it, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Jazz, I won't say that," or they'll realize, so it's kind of just the consistency and the support and really meeting people where they are.
I can use myself as an example. So it's been a consistent support groups for me for almost 10 years, starting out with the Most and Wise. I keep saying that, but just the Most Club. Starting out with the Most Club, being able to go in and check in, and you're there with your peers, right? So you kind of make some friends, and you come up with your peer support group, because everyone's in there checking in, talking about how they feel. So it makes everyone feel comfortable. And even outside of the clubs, when you do other activities with these members, you kind of feel like, okay, that's someone that I know will support me, or I can lean on. We're in this together. It kind of gave us that feeling. And then leading up to the internship with Mixer's always been there to support us.
Very nice. I'm gonna keep it here with Jasmine and Alan just for a second, because you are newest on the floor, and we are so pleased to have the valuable young person's input. Just curious, going back to the original conversation, everything we've discussed, where do you land when it comes to thinking about the impact or the opportunity for primary prevention? Particularly, I think as we as individuals have seen it play out in our lives as veterans of the clubs. Tug of war here. Someone's got to go for it.
I'll go ahead and take it first. I'd say it's most impactful when just learning to respect others space, and allowing us to, we can't do right now, fix, I'm lost for words, but peace, right? Allowing you to respect the person beside you is the first step in actually respecting everyone. So that's where I would say it's most impactful to me.
It takes me back, Neil, to something you've shared with me is, if we were to run down the line of, thinking about primary prevention as a potentially pristine or fragile moment, where we have the opportunity to make it more sustaining is when we graduate beyond the individual and we take it into the community, and we take it into the relationship in the community and the societal. So, I appreciate what Alan shared there, and it just makes me think of, really we are here to move upstream. Jasmine, I wasn't sure if you were going to chime in. Apologies.
Oh, I would just say a little bit. I would just say it's most impactful for me, definitely kind of seeing its results in the community. I feel like that's how it's most impactful. When I'm working with the kids and they actually the light bulb comes on, they actually get it. I feel like that's the most impactful moment when you actually, or when they come to you and say something that you told them weeks ago, and that they're actually like retaining the information, like that's like really impactful when the kids actually like get it and they're teaching their friends and stuff like that. Because, you know, it starts at young ages. It starts, you know, at, very young ages.
More reactions from the YouTube live feed. I agree when, this is from Chrissy, I agree that when our young people understand and are passionate about what is right and what it looks like, it's an avenue for change. Cassandra tells us it is hard sometimes to convey the harm that microaggressions can cause. So she really appreciates number 3 from the set of skills. Acknowledging our time here, I will give just a round robin chance for anyone to give us any closing thoughts, and then I'll take us out with just a few more announcements before we close the session. So Neil, Pat, Jason, Alan, Jasmine, any final thoughts as we wrap up this conversation for the premiere of season 2 of our community conversations?
I'll just say quickly, reading Dan Heath's book Upstream, there was a segment in it where he talked about, the one role that tends to lead itself to upstream thinking was parenting. And I've worked with a lot of young people who, this isn't an apples to apples reality. Some parents are not in role to serve their child's future. But what I liked about it is that, as a parent who's trying to be actively engaged, and I think about my 3 children and making sure that we're constantly, their mother and I are constantly trying to position our children so that the things that happen in their future are available to them. And we're trying to, so it's very much a role of primary prevention and upstream thinking in all areas of their life. And what was interesting about the comment in the book and the research that was being happening in the book around this was like, can you imagine then if all of us as adults were to provide, and this was specific to parents, but I'll say adults in terms of trusted adults, can you imagine if all of us as adults took the same kind of upstream thinking, not only for the children in our lives, but for our neighbors' children? That we were responsible for everyone else's children as we are ours. I thought, man, that to me feels like a great vision of when you get to those outer rings of the socio-ecological model in terms of community and society. How do you invest in primary prevention beyond just your own personal benefit?
I would go back to something that I think it was Neil that talked about, or at least mentioned earlier, and that's that this work is collaborative, and I think that's really important. That I think. Certainly when we did the Healthy Masculinity Action Project, Neil, we couldn't have done that on our own. No. I mean, you were intent on it being collaborative from the get-go. We collaborated, with other national nonprofits and agencies and organizations, and the project wouldn't have had the reach it did and the impact it did if there hadn't been that collaboration. So this is something that we have to figure out how to all do together. That's how we're going to have the impact that we want to have.
Yeah, I agree with what Pat and Neil both said. For me, this conversation is ongoing, right? This conversation is ongoing. I talked about starting points earlier in the conversation. For me, this is a starting point as we heard my colleagues talk about reshaping the conversation, maybe looking at what primary prevention looks like. I feel like this is a great way to start that conversation. And it's about, all those folks watching and in the chat that we all can collectively, like Pat said, collaboratively work together. So just appreciated the space. Definitely appreciated the space today.
We'll go to Alan.
I'm just gonna say, like Jason said, this is a wonderful start for myself, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to develop.
Certainly not least, but to close us out, Jasmine.
I agree with both Alan and Jason. I'm just really glad to be a part of this conversation. Definitely a good opportunity and good practice.
Well, I want to
thank you guys for coming. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no, please. I want to thank all of you for participating in this conversation, both our speakers and the viewers. Thank you so much for taking some time out of, I'm sure, a busy day to sit with us. We appreciate all the engagement. If we didn't get to your question, this is but the season premiere. We will get to you next time. Thank you for engaging with us. If you enjoyed today's program, I encourage you to like and subscribe, especially if you're joining us for the first time. Like and subscribe this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I also want to direct you to mcsr.org/signup. That's mixer.org/signup to get more information from us, like when more conversations will be unveiled, when trainings are made available, upcoming events and different announcements. So please join our email list to stay connected. Follow us on social media at Men Can Stop Rape. And it's 3 o'clock, so we will see you next time. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.